Sally, you are really beloved in the slow fish community, and I'm so interested and curious about what you do. Malia is a Slow Food USA editorial intern who's been working with us for the last couple of months and has actually been in conversation with Sally for your graduate research, if I got that right. And so I'm really excited for Malia to be part of this conversation as well. And also thanks to Malia for kind of connecting us and helping put this together. And Max Jones is also joining us today. He is a photographer. I'll put a link to his photography in the chat, as well as to Sally's Smokery. I'm really glad that Max is here too. Max has been working alongside Sally for the last few years. You are a photographer focused on food, the conservation of traditional food techniques. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I'm going to jump right over to you, Sally, so you can tell us who you are and where you are and what you do and why we're here.
Thank you. God, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And welcome to everybody. Haven't you got jobs to go to at 10 o'clock in the morning? It's 5 o'clock here in West Cork. It's coming towards the end of St. Patrick's Day. It's been a very quiet day. Since the first lockdown last year, bars in this country have been closed, which is unprecedented. So we celebrate at home. It's a little bit sad, really, but anyway. That's the way of it. That's where we are in Ireland at the moment. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about who I am and what I do. I moved to West Cork in Ireland. I am, in fact, a Scottish woman. I was born and brought up in the west of Scotland and trained for teaching in London when my parents moved there. So I came here when I was 1920, when I was 20. And I was just about finished with my degree in teaching and just thought, what on earth are you doing living in London? You don't like the education system. This is where you would love to be, because coming to Ireland 43, 44 years ago was like going back to Scotland as it had been 20 years before. It was absolutely wonderful. It still is. It's a fabulous place to live. So I married a commercial fisherman. I have 2 daughters, wonderful children. Being a fisherman's wife is quite a difficult role in any life. You're single parenting, you know, you're the cook, the bottle washer, taxi, onshore assistant to the fishing business. Yeah, I sometimes wonder how I did it all, but anyway, I did, and I still do. I got into this by default. We were left a bad debt in the salmon fishing season in 1979. Caught the fish. I delivered the fish to the man at 10 o'clock at night with my one small daughter and my large bum. And I met him every night for 3 weeks with the fish that my now ex-husband had landed. And the man that I gave him to, was smoking them. So he smoked the salmon, beautiful fish, huge numbers in those days. On one of the days, he landed 249 salmon, which was, and latterly, if the commercial sea fishermen got 249 fish for their season, they would be happy. We've issues, but so all is not lost. So after 2 years of waiting for him, he'd smoked the fish, he'd sold the fish, he'd drunk the proceeds, so he had nothing to give us, and that was a bit tough. But so he, embarrassed, eventually gave us the mini kiln that he'd been using, and I had already been experimenting, because you go off fish if you eat too much of one variety at any one time, which I did with mackerel. I ate mackerel for 3 weeks constantly, lunch, dinner, supper, gave up eating them. So I thought, you know, mackerel might be quite nice if it was smoked. It would taste different, it would hold better because it's cured and preserved a bit, but it was just to alter the flavor. So a tea chest was acquired in the days when tea used to come in plywood boxes, rectangular plywood box, big tall thing. And I thought, well, that's a good chamber. Drilled a hole in the bottom, set a little metal pan in it, and that was the beginning of my career in smoking. It was extremely unprofessional, I'd say, because it was a hot smoke, because the source of the heat and the smoke was underneath the fish. And as soon as the fish were cooked, they fell off the little hooks that I'd hung them on in the top of the box and landed in the sawdust at the bottom. Anyway, refining and refining. And then when this electrically powered chamber box with 3 drawers and a fan on one end was given in lieu of some of the money that was owed, I set to learning how to use it. And that was just brilliant, absolutely amazing. I could cold smoke in that. I could also hot smoke in it because it had heating elements. So I was able to do both cold and the hot smoking. And the wild salmon is traditionally cold smoked. Obviously, during my experimenting with the new machine, I had several accidents and inadvertently hot smoked some of it. It was fab, and the children loved it because you didn't need a knife. You spread it with a spoon, actually. Children liked it better that way. So I kept working on my methodology because I buy the wild salmon. I still buy the wild salmon, and I'm back to buying it in Ireland after 10 years of having to buy it in Scotland. One of the reasons why salmon started to disappear, in my mind, was because of pollution in the freshwater systems. Ireland joined the EU in 1974. I came here in 1975. So when we acceded to the EU, the deal was we gave 95% of the fish in Irish waters to the EU in exchange for farming subsidies because it was an agricultural country and still is to a large degree. So that meant that farmers were given access to subsidized fertilizers, fungicides, pesticides, etc. Of course, lay that on the land and it washes into the rivers. So the rivers were a problem because, as my friend Mark Boyden says, wild salmon are a fantastic bioindicator of water quality. If the water quality is not fit to allow salmon to survive in it, then we who draw a lot of water in this country from river systems, it's not fit for us either, actually, which is vital. So I taught myself how to fillet salmon first. That was tricky. It took me 40 minutes the first time I filleted a salmon, and I think I probably told Max that when he first came to work with me. No, there's no rush. You get one go at it. If you make a mistake with the first cut, you're going to lose a lot of the flesh. You want the flesh on the fillet, not on the bone. So 40 minutes, and I thought, God, I'm never going to make a handle of this. Anyway, practice. And it was good to practice on lower value species, like pollock or hake or whatever the fisherman was landing. The lazy drawers here always took to cooking fish on the bone. It's much easier and it's much better flavor, but it also saves the filleting a bit. So taught myself to fillet. So we fillet the sides, the 2 sides off each fish, wash them, and then lay them in a bed of dry salt and in decreasing order of size, because the joy of wild fish is that no 2 individuals, they are individuals, no 2 are exactly the same. I determined from the thickness of the fat in the belly wall what the fat content of that fish will be, and the fats in the fish inhibit the uptake of salt. When we're smoking, there are 3 systems for conserving the fish. The first is the salting. Bacteria don't like salt, so it inhibits the bacterial activity in the flesh. It also gives it flavor because we are creatures that came from the sea as we were evolving. So our tears are salty, our blood is salty. Salt is a fundamental for human life, for any life. So the salting gives the fish some beginnings of flavor, but it also slows down the bacterial activity. My fat content in the fish, gauged by the thickness of the fat in the belly wall, will determine for me how long that fish is going to have to sit in the salt. And when I was learning the techniques, I reached out to a facility in Aberdeen in Scotland, because I'm a Scot. The DEFRA, the British Department of Agriculture, had a research facility there called the Torry Research Station. And from the 1920s, 1930s onwards, they wrote papers about conserving fish and how to handle fish. And this was all pre vacuum packing, chill distribution, widespread refrigeration. So their salting regimen for their salmon, when I read them, and I'd been experimenting a bit, and I thought, right, an hour per pound of fresh flesh, that seems to be giving me the right flavor, the right texture, because the first one that I did, I gave it 40 minutes in dry salt and thought, perfect, smoked it, looked great, looked really good. Tasted it, and it was nothing. It had no flavor whatsoever. It was really bizarre. So then I realized that I have to bring the salt up to meet the smoke and not completely destroy the precious fish itself, you know. So it was a question of trial and error. Our research facility from papers from the 1950s and 60s suggested that I dry salt a side of salmon for 24 hours, which made me hoot with laughter. If you dry salted fish side of salmon for 24 hours, you could virtually play cricket with it afterwards. It'd be so rigid. The salt is drawing water out as well as conserving it and taking the bacterial fondness for it out of the picture. So we're drawing water out as well, and all bacteria need water to replicate in. So that was the beginning. So I realized I had to up the ante, but definitely not 24 hours. But that would have been in the days when kind of like salamis used to be hung above the bars before hygiene regulations stopped all that. They used to hang sides of salmon above the bar. People smoking cigars and pipes, fine, different flavor. So it had to be really heavily salted because there was no refrigeration. And with, as I said, the vacuum packing and the chill chain distribution systems, it meant that I could cut back on that and, yeah, not have it just like a great big kipper. So more experimenting, gave product to friends. What do you think? Can you give me a critique? Don't tell me it's lovely. Please be critical. That was fundamental. Friends are great. What would you do without them? But especially when you're trying to develop a new, to yourself, a new product, and you're hoping that you hit it at the right, you know, not too much smoke, not too much salt, da, da, da. So eventually, after much of the verbal research, I settled on my salting regimen and the smoking regimen, because over smoking is something you can't undo, and it's quite easy to do that. You know, if you turn your back for half an hour and it's still working and it's still smoking, it does become fairly, I think, inedible actually. You can't take it out once it's there. So that's the first stage was the salting. We pull the sides out of the dry salt, then rinse them off in fresh water. And because the flesh and the tail is so thin, we never, ever put salt on the tail of the fish, you know, maybe from where the vent is, the anal vent, right back. No salt whatsoever, because the sides are going to sit in the box of dry salt with the next fish on top with its layer of salt, but not only as far as the vent. The salt will trickle through, it'll penetrate that thin flesh, so no salt at all on the tails, and it's still a bit salty at the tail end. So rinse it off. If I feel that it may need more stabilizing, I'll leave it sitting in the rinsing water for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just to allow if there's any sort of over salting anywhere, it will even it out. Then they're loaded into the kilns, and I use 2 big kilns now. They're electrically powered. They're probably 50 years old. I like old kit. I don't like modern electrics that have got a warranty that lasts 3 years and 1 day, and they seem to have that programmed in. You know, you buy something new and you think, great, good bit of kit, and it just fails. So old now. In my day, when you spent money on something, you expected it to last a while. So I have these 2 very basic kilns. They don't have any computer systems in them. I'm in control of the machine, and I think that's something that is quite important to the preservation and the whole ethos of what I do. Load the rinsed sides into the kilns on the trays, and then load the fire drawers. We've got 3 drawers down the side of these chambers, and for cold smoking, we only use 1 drawer, because when you set light to it and the fan's running, you're getting 8 degrees centigrade off that box. And you must keep your temperature for cold smoking under 30 centigrade, and for comfort under 28. Sometimes it's good to have it a bit warmer when it's really cold in the winter and your air temperature, I mean, it is relative. I'm in West Cork. We live under the Gulf Stream, which is fab. So it never really gets very cold here. So a cold day for us would be 4 degrees centigrade. So if I'm running the machine and I'm getting 8 degrees off the firebox, 4 degrees air temperature, that's 12 degrees centigrade. That's still a bit cool. And because the fats in the salmon, when the colder they are, the less viscous they are. So you really want them to be moving a little bit, because that's what's absorbing the smoke, the esters from the wood smoke. We also have to keep an eye on things so that the wood shavings that we're using, and we're working with beech, which is beautiful. It's a really sweet flavored wood. You have to dampen the shavings down when you put them in the drawers, because you don't want them catching fire. If they catch fire, you get too many acidic flavors coming off, different flavor profiles at different temperatures. So we have to control the fire and have it just smoldering. And that's quite tricky to play with, to get it to smolder and not flare up, because when we switch on the electric fan, it's sucking air in through the front of the box and encouraging flame. You know, you're getting loads of oxygen. So Max and myself are masters and mistresses of fire. We control it. And I think in the modern computerized systems, you're removed from that particular contact with what you're doing. The other great divider and parameter that we must work with is atmospheric humidity. What we're seeking to achieve at the end of the smoking process is a dry surface on the fish where the free water has been removed, evaporated off. A combination of the warmer air with the smoke in it running over the top of the fish is lifting off more water molecules, again making it inhospitable to bacteria. But this is West Cork, and it's very mild, but it's very wet here. So very often our humidity is 99%. and then I giggle and wonder what 100% humidity is. Is that pure water? So that would slow down our curing process dramatically. If we've got 99% humidity, it can take anything from 24 to 36 or even 48 hours to finish curing out the fish, to get that dry surface. And with modern technology, occasionally I bring the dehumidifier into the space in the workshop where we do the smoking, and just close all the doors and run the dehumidifier. Just as out of interest from that, I worked with a friend in Cape Cod some years ago. He wanted to set up a smokery, and he asked me would I come and teach him. So I agreed on condition that he worked only with wild fish. So he was getting wild fish from Alaska, and we started working with those. Again, completely different to our Atlantic salmon, because you've got 4 or 5 different species of salmonids in the Pacific, all of which have a different fat profile, different flavor profiles. So it was quite an interesting experiment. His FDA authorities said he had to salt the fish in the fridge at 4 degrees centigrade. So I was saying, we're not going to get the salt penetrating the water coming out because the fats in the fish are going to be too solid, not solid, but certainly not fluid enough to allow the water escape and the salt egress of water, ingress of salt. And then when the smoking phase started, we had all sorts of problems with the salting regimen. So in the end, I said, Peter, look, this is the way I do it at home. I do it at ambient temperature because then I know what I'm doing. But if we're trying to do it in the fridge, we did run through that. Had been given my proprietary salting regimen, but actually when it came to it and we smoked it and tasted it again, no flavor profile whatsoever. So just because that was still experimental and this was not going out for sale, I hasten to add, we had to take those sides of salmon that we had smoked and cured out and dried the flesh, the surface on. We put them back into a strong brine to try and get salt in again. And then, of course, we had to go back and run them through the kilns again with a very, very gentle flow of smoke through them. I was not to oversmoke them. That worked. And it was at that point that I said, perhaps we should think about just salting them at ambient. It was grand. Then we switched the kilns on in Cape Cod. 26% humidity, which was, so I said to Peter, God, they're going to dry the surface before they take any salt up. We're going to have to increase the humidity in here. So thank God it was good solid floors and good solid walls. We tipped buckets of water onto the floor to raise the humidity in the space. And we got it up to about 50%, which was a humidity that I think only twice in my life here have I seen it that low. But that was the key to it over there. Back here, 99% is a bit tricky to work with, but it's just another one of the parameters. So the lovely old kilns have got timer switches on them, which is a joy, because sometimes you end up, down in the workshop at 11 o'clock at night, putting fish into the kilns to smoke through the night because the air temperature is a bit lower, particularly so in the summer months here. So we would put them into the machine and then you'd be thinking, oh God, but they're not going to need 10 hours. They're only going to need 6 hours. Does that mean that I have to get up at 5 o'clock and go down and switch it all off? No, joyful. As long as it's experience that teaches you that you can look at it and think, I think with that humidity, that smoke flow, the number of the total volume of material in the chambers, you just judge, guess. So in the morning, whatever time we've set the timers for, we go in and they've had the preliminary smoke, which has started to shrink the flesh back a bit, removing more water, concentrating down the flavors even more. And it allows the little pin bones, which 32 of them, like human teeth, which run from the front end of the fish down towards the tail. They stop where the ribs would finish on the whole fish. We pull those out by hand because there's a tradition for cutting smoked salmon at an angle of about 45 degrees, which just happens to be the angle that the fish, those pin bones, lie in the flesh. So when you're using the fish, if it hasn't been pin boned, you're going to be encountering lots of these little bits. So if you're not cutting at 45 degrees, you will find a bone in one of your 45 degree slices. If you're cutting at a more obtuse angle, you might be cutting through even more bone. So make life simple for people. Pull all the pin bones out by hand and then trim the fish down, because as the desiccation of the surface is happening, the flesh starts, the skin starts to curl up a bit around the edges of the fillet. And what I want when it's finished is for somebody to take this piece of fish, put it on a board and slice it without any further involvement with the skin curling up, or just a bit of a pedant that way. Anyway, that's me. So trim the fish, but everywhere we've pulled a bone out of and everywhere we've cut round the edge of the fillet, we've exposed fresh flesh, which has not been dried, which is another potential source of bacterial activity. So we put them back into the machine. They're not finished at this stage. They're nearly finished when we pin bone. They go back into the machine for as long as it takes to seal over all those flesh wounds, I suppose you'd call them. And then when they're finished, and we let them come down to ambient temperature, vacuum pack them, and pop them into the kiln. On some glorious days, everything goes according to plan, and the divine is with us. Low atmospheric humidity, good smoke flow, not an awful lot of stuff in there. And we get a fantastic cured surface. It's called the pellicle, the cut surface of the fish, you know, what was on the inside of the fillet. That pellicle, when we have all things going right, means that I can hold that fish for 3 months vacuum packed in the cold room at 4 or 5 degrees centigrade. And it's a little bit like the cheesemakers. Never taste the stuff straight out of the machine. It tastes first of salt, it's very prominent, and then a little while later you'll get the salt, the smoke, and then you'll get the fish. But if you leave it for 48 hours before you taste it, the flavors are starting to homogenize. If you leave it for 3 months, you've got a total homogenization of the flavor profile through the flesh. So the skin, just under the skin, tastes exactly the same as the flesh at the surface, you know, right at the top where the pellicle is. And we call that matured salmon because it has been maturing. Retailers want the fish almost as soon as it comes out of the kilns because it is an expensive commodity. So if they want the maximum shelf life for them to be able to sell it at the prices. So they are not keen on the matured. It's more for real aficionados, and we love it. My former husband took a side of salmon out. He's still at sea. He's a skipper now. He runs a whale and dolphin watching business, which is very successful for him. Thank God. So he took a side out in September, vacuum packed, threw it on the dash in the wheelhouse, and it sat there all through the winter. And then in the late spring the following year, I don't know why he left it there. Maybe he was really cross with me. He opened it and he contacted our daughter, who was working with me at the time. Tell your mum that fish was bloody brilliant. I'm going to do that with it all the time now. I'm sure the authorities here would be mortified that he'd eaten a side of fish that was at least 4 months out of date. It hadn't had, well, maybe in the winter it chill, but it certainly didn't have any chilling in the summer months because it gets hot in the wheelhouse. Oh, glass, lovely. It didn't kill him. Oh. Anyway, so that's what got me thinking about doing the matured. So it's only one batch and maybe 50, Max will tell you that. I don't think I can't remember the last time I put a batch away and said that's for maturing. Anyway, that's divine fish. So that's really where I'm at with it. But my daughter doesn't work with me anymore, which is really sad. She's got Lyme's disease, so she's not very well, Bunny. She's improving. She's getting better. And she's been using biomagnetics. There's no medical system for helping her. So it's quite impressive using magnets and changing her body a bit. That's about it. And that's about it. Now I'm going to mention the wonderful Max Jones. Max worked for a cheese company in London, and every Christmas I do a lot of business, and have done for years, with Neil's Yard Dairy, and I'm the only fish in the cheese shop, which is rather fab. And Max worked for another fabulous cheese company in London, but all those fantastic young cheesemongers hang out together, and Max knew about me and knew about my daughter leaving, and also had seen my frankly appalling website and suggested that he'd love to come and help and see what I do, learn what I do, and maybe take some photographs. And he's created the new website, which is absolutely fantastic. He stalked me for 2.5 years. And we got up to all sorts of good stuff, foraging and fishing. He bought himself a little boat. So I hadn't been fishing since I had the children. So it was great fun to go back out potting with him. It was good fun. And we've done saloni, we did slow fish, and he's such a precious friend. I adore him. And I'm going to hand over to you, Max, if I may.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. That's a perfect segue. Thank you so much, Sally. That is wonderful. And maybe Max, now this is a perfect segue. You can tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into check out some of your photos.
Sure thing. I guess it's quite interesting to just maybe get me on board for this, because if you look at it objectively, it's a really strange situation where fundamentally there's somebody who felt it so important that the knowledge of a true artisan like Sally Barnes doesn't go lost. That basically I just moved my life over to to Ireland to see if I could support in whatever way I could, or help propagate true knowledge of actual real artisan food production. So I'm still here 3 years on. It's just going to see. So looking at the website of Sally Barnes, what actually took to sort of like shocked me almost into action was it wasn't a website. It was a copy and paste of a Facebook page, of Sally's Facebook page, which was basically a rant at the farmed salmon industry. And that was super surprising. It just showed a real buck of a trend of what it is to have a business and a website. And it was really old school in the kind of brilliant way. Long story short, I came to help Sally because I was really panicked to hear that her daughter was leaving. And for me, knowledge that remains generationally within a family speaks volumes in terms of understanding the engagement with each individual's existence in a specific geographic place. Apart from all of that incredible knowledge that Sally has of how to preserve fish, which is so unique because it comes from a totally lived experience. It's not, you don't go on YouTube how to smoke fish in like 5 minutes. It's the sort of like legitimate characteristics of what Sally does. It just it's that borderline craft art thing. There's so much there. And so I wanted to help Sally in whatever way I could. Originally, I thought, okay, I need to learn about it. I understand food because I come from a cheese preservation background. And yeah, I sort of picked up the smoking quite quickly because I was able to sort of like shadow and apprentice Sally and take pictures, because I just thought, God, if Sally stops, then there's nobody to continue. So where does that knowledge go? And then I was figuring out ideas of, maybe if I take enough pictures, then Sally can make a book and describe all of these things. But then what happened was I got really caught up in a whole other side of what it is to be a true, like a proper artisan, old school, traditional, pre-industry. I just saw that what Sally's process is not just about smoking fish. That's incredible, and lived and developed with each batch being honed to taste more delicious than the last, because we have taste buds. But actually, I got caught up in the salmon, and that we don't know enough about wild. And I learned so much about this from Sally again, as sort of shadowing and apprenticing somebody who's had a real lived experience and a life kind of devoted to one thing, to specifically to nature, to harnessing what nature provides, taking, not ever in excess, and then preserving what isn't eaten fresh to be able to eat it further down the line. So you grip things in their season and in their abundance, and then they feed you and they nourish you for a few weeks or a few months afterwards. Then I got really interested in actually going to see how the fishing was done, because it's not big boats. It's like commercial fishermen. You think the first thing that pops up into most people's heads are enormous trawlers pumping out billowing diesel fumes, pillaging the ocean floor with enormous beam trawls or whatever. But actually, commercial fishermen, you meet people like in Youghal, like Mikey, Sally's fisherman who I met. He is of the place, and he fishes with his cousin Eamon. Eamon's surname is Eamon Uniac. They are fishing in the shadow of Mount Uniac. That is, they are so of the place, and it's so important to experience these commercial fishermen who live with the wild resource that they have, and that they develop, like Sally developed smoking. They have this obscene knowledge of the water and the salmon and what they do. They're the most incredible biologists and technicians and craftspeople that you're likely to meet. They work with tiny nets, limited size nets actually, that is an enforced handicap that they have to use so they don't catch too many salmon. But they're magnificent because they understand where they're from, and they are where they're from, and they learn the river, and the river feeds the community. And Sally smokes and preserves that bounty from the river, which is caught with tremendous knowledge by Mikey and Eamon and Mickey. And the sort of beautiful line continues. And then, I freaked out because driving back from a really poor catch, to see the fishing, they were really sad. We caught maybe 3 fish, I think. And they're not making any money off it. It's just part of who they are, so they still do it. And then I was driving back with the salmon, and then had a little freak out because then it's 2 hours away from the smokery. So I was driving back and I thought, oh my God, if there's no salmon because they're in such decline to catch, then where's the salmon for Sally to smoke? She won't work with farmed fish. She doesn't buy in loads of pre-ordered, coloured and sectioned bits of fish to then pump out at airports and all sorts all over the world. So then there was that. So apart from the fact that within the generation, Sally's daughter wasn't able to work with her anymore, combined with the fact that the actual resource, the wild salmon, was potentially also vanishing. To sort of like draw my little piece to a close, basically it wasn't about making a book to sort of like get Sally's knowledge down. We actually figured out that the best thing to do was to build a space right next to the smokery, quite a sort of humble thing, but just to focus on sharing the knowledge. So we built a space, and on the website, we developed a whole bunch of different courses so that people could actually come and experience what I'd experienced, which was the most incredible education of my life, frankly, because of ethics, industry, food systems, nature, biodiversity, the health of the planet, where we should be stopping, what we should be doing more of, and then so it turned into a way to try and bring an income to the smokery, which meant that Sally, no offense, love, but the spring chicken in you is potentially a little bit further back. It's like you can't be hauling around loads of fish boxes and but if you can tell people about it and do it with them. I myself learned by doing, which is why I came, and I've learned so much. So then we thought the best way to actually preserve the knowledge is to share it and for people to come and experience it firsthand. That's an incredible description that Sally gave of the process of smoking, but it's like the Zoom is brilliant, but you need to live and breathe it. I realized that's the true way to understand anything. And so that's just awesome that we've been able to offer that to people. COVID's a slight pain in the balls because that's put a stopper in that for now. but yeah, it's people like Sally are amongst the most important people alive for me. So the more we can be exposed to Sally's brilliant brain and just general awesomeness, the better, because we all learn to look after ourselves and the planet, and just not start an enormous industrial enterprise. Just be humble and, what is it you say, Sal? Roof above your head,
Self-sustaining.
bottle of wine.
Self-sustaining. Yeah. Oh, that's it. Yeah.
What's the
I thought
catchphrase? It's like, as long as
Which
you've
one?
got as long as you've got
Oh, roof over your head, food in your belly, clean water to drink, and good friends. Oh, dry
yeah,
bed helps. Yeah, dry bed. Yeah. Thank you,
extremely good life lessons. So yeah, those are my 2 cents. Yeah.
Keep it simple. Bless you.
That's it, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, will we do the slides? Because
Yeah.
your photographs are just so breathtaking, Max.
There's
Yeah, I just said to somebody there, I don't know what I did in a previous life to have had you walk through my door, but oh my goodness me. Yes, you have certainly re-energized the old battery, sweetheart.
Just
I
keep
think
being awesome. Everyone needs to just keep being awesome.
Keep being awesome, that's the one. Yeah. But it's about the care and the love for what we do, Max. I mean, you know, when we're all covered in blood, and I'm afraid it is a bit gory, we just laugh, don't we? Because we do respect the fish, because each side of salmon gets a little massage after it comes out the salt. I forgot that vital step. Because the fish are being caught and frozen down so fast, because the fishery only lasts each tide for about 3 hours. So the fish are out of the water and into a freezer within less than 4 hours of being caught. So when they haven't even had time to get rigor mortis. So when they're defrosted, that blood, you can still persuade that blood out of the veins under the skin in the fish. And there's something so primal about touching that fish and honoring it. I mean, they are the most beautiful creatures. And I think, the big buzzword, sustainability, it just drives me nuts. It means so many things to different people. And my simplistic way of looking at that is that I sustain myself, and I hope I don't make too big a negative impact on the natural world around me, because I'm just a part of it. And I think that's what we've lost. We've lost our connection to the fact that we are all interconnected. We're part of this planet. And if we don't look after it at our peril. And I kind of think sometimes when the COVID brain really gets to me, and I think I can't think about things and I forget stuff, I think it's nature's way of telling us something's wrong. That's a line from a great song. And it's Mother Nature just giving us a poke and going, do you know what? I'm fed up with you humans. You're corrupting my rivers. You've corrupted my ocean. And what you've done to the land, you've killed all the bees, and it's making us sit back. And I think all of us, particularly here in Ireland, because we're still the 5 kilometre, that's as far as we can wander, except we're food producers and we have to deliver stuff sometimes. But we've got time to sit and look at the beauty of this natural world and, appreciate wildlife, listen to the birds, smell the ocean. Yeah. So curiously, I am weird, but I'd like to be positive. So I do find that there is some bizarre positivity. Maybe we're all just having to relearn that we share a planet and that nobody's better than anybody else. And if we just respect each other and care for each other, and particularly care about the natural world and try not to pour too many chemicals in here and there, then we've got some hope for a really bright future for the next generations coming up, who will be wanting to know, Max Jones, how to make the best cheeses. The best new cheese in Ireland has been created in the last 12 months by Max. very small production. They have 4 cows, and it's breathtaking. It's stunning. It's raw milk, and it's all of Max's knowledge condensed down. He has a lot of experience in Italy because his mum's Italian. He's a wonderful cook, fabulous chef. So, yeah, you know, these little things are, and it's not mass production, and it is much more community based. Yeah, there's really bright lights once we get through this particular nature-induced fabulous system for dealing with far too many people, maybe. That's not to be negative, and it's been tragic in lots of instances, but
something interesting, Sally. I don't know because I lost the audio for a second there. But did you mention the sort of salmon numbers and how they've changed since COVID?
yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. Last year, the year before last, I started buying again. As I said, I bought from Scotland for 10 years because I wanted sea fish, and the angling lobby managed to ban that fishery, which was tragic for the family involved, 3 generations. That was them out of business. So I had to come back to Ireland, but it was 10 years after the ban had been brought in here on the sea fishing, also instituted and conducted by the angling lobby. They weren't getting enough fish on their rods in Germany and France and the UK, and Irish sea fishermen. I mean, it was an inshore fishery. Small boats couldn't go out far, so they were being accused of taking fish that were heading back to Europe, you know, other than Ireland, which just left me a bit speechless. They're not coming on a tour of the island. When the salmon have fed and they've fattened up, something kicks in when they're way out in the high Atlantic. And it's time to go back home, lads. So, you know, I need to reproduce. So they stop feeding when they come back to the coast. They have nothing in their bellies. They're running on that fat that I was talking about. That's their fuel. That gets them back to the river that they came out of, where they were spawned, and allows them to come back and spawn themselves. So numbers have been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And I think the year before last, I think I managed to procure 350 fish from the boys. Their season is extremely short, extremely protracted. When they banned the sea fishing here, there was already, as Max said, these guys don't make money, but it's so much part of their culture and tradition. It's what their fathers did. It's what their grandfathers did. They may be small farmers. They may have a little bit of land, but it's not enough to live on. So they had riparian rights to fish for salmon in the rivers. But over the generations, that's being phased out, of course. But there are still the fabulous diehards. I couldn't live without them. The quota was then, we were told that when the fishing at sea was banned, they would analyse every river in this country for its ability to sustain a catch out of the returning fish. And because they've DNA profiled all the salmon in Irish rivers, so they can tell when they find a salmon on somebody's premises, they'll take a scale or a sample from the otolith in the fish's head and can tell you exactly what river that came from. And some of the rivers are so low that there is absolutely no take allowed, whether it's anglers or commercial. But when it comes to the Blackwater River that we're sourcing the fish from, the quota for the entire river for the year, I think the inland fisheries set the quotas based on previous year's landings, and they would have been allocated about, for the river, and this is for both methods of catching, maybe you say the year before last, it might have been about 4,000 fish in total from January through till September. The anglers are allowed on the water in January. The commercial men are only allowed to start fishing in May. They all have tags. They're under a very strict quota. So that year, their quota was just over 1,000 fish for the commercial men, which meant that the anglers got 3,000 fish. And it was the same last year. Commercial quota, 1,500 fish. angling quota 3,500. And I queried that and I said, we were promised a 50-50 split between angling interests and commercial interests. So who's doing the maths? And they said, oh, well, you know, the anglers are on the water from January through till September. So they're allowed to kill what they call 2 sea winter fish, the big salmon. Those big fish carry more egg because they're just bigger fish. So they're going to have more progeny who are stronger. But those are the ones you really want to conserve and preserve. But last summer, for some wonderful reason, the guys started the fishing in May and it was quiet. Oh, we've only had 3. Oh, we've only got 6. And then I think it was about July, Max, was it, when they said, we don't know where these fish are coming from. We had 41 fish in one tide. And that's unprecedented. There was an unholy and unforgivable amount of poaching going on in the sea for salmon last summer. And because there was so much illegal fish coming in, I won't touch it. I want to see the fish conserved. I watched my sea fishermen friends, salmon men who had fished in the sea, lose their whole livelihood. And I've watched the total demise of the inshore fleet here, largely because of the ban on the salmon, because as I said right at the start, that's how we survived. As small boat fisher people, you survived on the income from the salmon. Anyway, that's gone for those guys now, and they've gone. But unbelievable. There was also a very strange anomaly for the years that I've been buying from the lads, apart from last year. There would be salmon coming in that were 4 to 6 pounds in weight. We work in kilos here, but I'll go into pounds. 4 to 6 pound fish. In the day when my former husband was fishing, the average weight of the salmon would have been 7.5 to 8.5 pounds. And they were fabulous fish. They had all but vanished. And then the other side of it was huge ones. So, you know, when we're trying to supply Neil's Yard and they want sites that they can retail at a semi-sensible price, they don't want to know that Sally has fish that sides of salmon that weigh more than 2 kilos each, when the average would have been 700 or 800 grams. So nothing in between. But there's a difference in the eating quality, obviously, because of the different fat content. But nobody can explain to me where that class of fish that had been missing, the 3 kilo fish, 3 to 4 kilo fish, where have they been all this time? And there's been an unproven theory that people know where wild salmon go to feed. They feed in international waters outside anybody's jurisdiction, somewhere in the north West Atlantic, where there's a couple of upwellings of cold water from Antarctica, cold water nutrient rich, plankton bloom, fantastic feeding station. Krill replicating and reproducing at great rates, and that's what gives wild salmon its beautiful color. They ingest krill, fabulous little creatures. So the suspicion is that some people, international fleets, know that the wild salmon go there to feed, and they're feeding with little baby ones, they're feeding with adult ones, they're feeding with every other type of fish in the sea. But the fact that that class, that 3 kilo fish, suddenly reappeared last year, 4 months after the fresh fish markets in Europe, where most Irish fish goes to, they were closed. So the boats weren't fishing. They were told not to fish because the COVID had caused the total collapse of the fish market. So I don't know, were there foreign vessels taking that class of fish in a specific size of mesh, or is that just purely circumstantial and I'm a conspiracy theorist? Who can tell? That's me shutting up now. I'd love to look at some pictures, please.
Excellent. Let's take a look. Thank you so much, Sally. I think this is all I mean, it's wonderful to witness the connection with you and Max. Somebody commented that it's that human connection is so nice, and it does feel so important to carry on knowledge and techniques, and also just to care for the importance of it, as Max has done with you. So we're gonna roll through some of Max's beautiful photos, and Sally, please comment on them as you wish, and Max also please
Can you?
comment on them.
Yeah, Max, can you unmute yourself, sweetheart? Thanks. Can you comment on some of your pictures as well, Max?
Let's see. I'm asking to unmute you now so that we can hear you.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Sure thing. Run through some. Absolutely. They just pretty much should speak for themselves. But absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, I'll just pop through them, and then you can jump in wherever you would like. I am gonna make this full screen.
Oh, brilliant.
There we go. All right.
Right. This is just off the coast here. These are the Stags Rocks, which are about 4 kilometers off the shore. Very dangerous place because they're far enough off the shore that, you know, you would think, oh, if we're 4 kilometers out in the dark and the fog, there's nothing there. Wonderful. That's beautiful. That's Towhead, and that's West Cork.
I kind of think it's awesome just because I think that particular picture with the stags hilarious because there are stories that Sally has because existing as a commercial fisherwoman and commercial fisherman's wife, there are stories there for another time, but about how I think they got wrecked because they caught the mother load of herring and sort of got stuck out there one time in November.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. They had to land on the stags in the middle of the night out of a life raft. Very hairy. There we are outside the workshop with, gosh, what is that, Max?
That is a lovely herring. Large.
Big
no, they're
herring.
just beautiful. Salmon are just incredible. There's nothing more to say. They're just magnificent.
And you can see he's got beautiful fins. If you see fish from fish farms, because they're kept in close proximity to each other, they rub off the cage, they rub off the mesh, they rub off each other, and then their fins just get horribly distorted. But they're just magnificent creatures. I don't know who the bat is. Here's my workshop. And that's my house behind. I live on top of my workshop, which was essential when the children were small. And, you know, you would be having to get fish out of salt in the middle of the night or, you know, in the evenings. It was important to have my business based very close to home. Yeah. Gorgeous. Oh, now. Oh, that was fun. We also process albacore tuna because they were being landed into Irish waters maybe 20 years ago. And I was looking for a substitute. I was looking for an oily fish that wasn't mackerel that we could smoke to kind of make up for the declining numbers of wild salmon. So I developed a process. I couldn't find any information about it. So developed a process for smoke curing albacore tuna because the Irish fleet had a quota in that. But we got 2 tons of fresh tuna before last. And we had to fillet it all in one marathon session.
That's a lot of tuna.
Oh, holy moly, never again. We only did a ton last year, didn't we? Which was much easier. But yeah, that's an autumn fish. They come into Irish waters only in August, September. That's fish which have been, I'd say, semi-smoked. They'll be waiting to be pin-boned. I can tell because you can see the little gloss on the flesh there. They're definitely part through the process. Next. Yeah, salting. And you see no salt on the tail. Oh, no salt at all on the tail. Yeah, and dry salt. And we recycle the carcasses and the salt and give them to a potting man who lives locally. This is haddock. Oh, God, I love haddock. And we don't use dyes, so the colours in those fish are from the beach. Oak doesn't give you that intensity, that gorgeous golden colour. It's a very pallid, peely-wally, we say in Scotland, if you use oak for your sauce, for your smoke. But they are beech, lovely. Yeah, this is us in COVID time. And it's bloody freezing in the workshop. There's no heating. Oh, now. You better explain this one, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, that was to sort of try and make it brief. When processing the salmon, there are certain aspects which I think I replied to somebody what happens to the offcuts. Sometimes you would find the females have 2 sacks of roe, and the first time I came to work with Sally puts all of the waste back into nature by giving them to the local crab potter. So all of that goodness does actually end up back in the sea locally. However, I've had botarga before. It's really tasty. So we figured out it's very difficult to do with salmon eggs because they're so fatty and large, but because the fish are caught really close to the sea in the river, they're not very far inland, the eggs are still really small. So after a long lot of trial and error, we figured out how to do it. Tasty botarga, lovely microplaned over a poached egg. But the cool thing about that is that we sealed them in molten beeswax. The thought being, what does vacuum packing do with plastic? It removes oxygen, to prevent oxidation and stops water and moisture from rehydrating the fish and therefore spoiling. Molten beeswax does exactly the same. So experimented with a few different blends of natural waxes, including like a beeswax with propolis still in the wax. Propolis, amazing, from the Greek propolis, before community. It's what bees use to kind of like block up their entrances or any holes in the hive, or if like a mouse goes into the hive and can't get out for some reason because it gets stung to death, if the bees can't remove the rotting mouse to prevent any disease and bacteria from spreading, they cake it in propolis. So propolis is very awesome. The bees know it because they get it from the trees. When the tree is injured, doesn't want to get bacterial or fungal infections, pumps out loads of sap. The bees know this. They go to seek specific sap, which then they turn into propolis and use it for the same reason, but in their hive. So then we now are using that to add to the beeswax because of its antiviral, antifungal properties and antibacterial properties. So we learned from the bees who learned from the trees. And then it keeps quite well. This, just to finish, is an example where we thought we'd try with a piece of salmon, because we're vac packing salmon slices, and we thought, why not give it a blast? And then through a few different bits of trial and error, again, smoked salmon, cured on all sides, just a little piece so as not to waste the whole side, and then going through that process of the different waxes and propolis, immersed that a few times at a particular temperature, and we ate that salmon 7 months after it had been put in beeswax, and it was ace. So what I get really buzzed about there is that you've gone from taking something totally natural from the water, you've preserved it with salt and smoke, also natural. If there wasn't a tiny fan in Sally's kiln, then you wouldn't even be using electricity, and then you preserve it in beeswax. So you basically go from catching a fresh fish and then eating it 7 months later without the need of any electricity or anything. So that was kind of super fun to experiment with.
No plastic. It was very important.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And that's it, open.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
That looks very tasty.
Oh yeah. Oh God, it was amazing, wasn't it? And you have to wait so long before you taste it. It was a revelation, actually. It was really, really good. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and it was fun cracking it open, wasn't it? So we do. This is a group of friends that came to do the smoking session. When we got the building constructed, and Max did he is the most extraordinary designer. It was his visualization and his vision that allowed us to create the space. So we were doing trialing it and invited friends around to see, was it possible for me to teach them to fillet fish and smoke fish? So that was what we were doing that day. It was great. And because we're not in a workshop, we didn't have to wear all the plastic kit and the hats and the white coats and stuff. This is outside our workshop, and it's a COVID safe space because there's no windows. There's screens in to stop the rain coming in. So it's open air, open plan. And the windows behind that you can see in that image are looking into the filleting area in the workshop. So if there was a large group of people that we couldn't possibly allow in, they can watch to see us filleting inside that space.
Oh, brilliant.
Next. Yeah, that's the keep.
Mm-hmm.
And a wonderful friend of Max's from Canada came and executed the building. It's native West Cork timber. It's Macrocarpus pine. And it's the tiki bar. That corrugated was the former roof on the workshop, which was just corrugated. So we've gone very upmarket, and now we have an insulated roof. Somebody was asking me about the cold. Yeah, it gets really cold. But the new insulated roof over the working space does give us some more protection. So not really fit for winter use, as you can see. But it's never that cold, and you just wear an extra coat and a hat. Yeah, and we are out in the middle of nowhere. Sorry, Max, you go.
This is just demonstrating what I think is really interesting. I think actually I've just seen that Johnny Fishmonger was asking about beechwood, but as I learned from Sally, you have to buy in different food safe grades of beechwood chips from Germany via the UK, which is mental. You can't, or at least couldn't, use native hardwoods or a piece of plum from your back garden to smoke because it's not food safe, which is mental. So in and amongst, am I allowed to tell people this, Sal?
Oh, I'm not listening. Sorry, I'm reading. What are you going to tell them?
No, but yeah, you go for it. Sorry, I'll just say this may or may not be true, but that sometimes perhaps in the same bags as are written all of the food safe symbols and things from Germany. Again, just to be smart and sustainable, or just basically intelligent. There's a joiner, a carpenter nearby who's a friend of Sally's, and they basically get bits of beechwood shavings, which they swap out for fish. So that's an amazing way of ensuring there's no paint or plastic or resin in the beechwood, because Sally says, you know, you're going to end up eating the fish fundamentally. So that kind of ensures that it's really clean. And why I love that is that it's a different texture, so it gives a different burn and creates more lift in the smoking draw, which means there's more oxygen. So if you want it to burn more, you add more of that coarse stuff. And I love it because each little curl of beechwood just makes me think, again, it's just somebody's movement crafting another thing, you know, a mile away. They're all little bits of somebody's, you know, table, and I just love it. It makes loads of sense. That may be a lie if anybody's listening in from the
suits.
The Department of Health. I think
yeah, but they've just changed the regulation again. I think in Ireland our authorities embrace every incoming bit of regulation so wholeheartedly. It was them who told us that we couldn't use the native timbers that I'd always used. And as Max said, my deal with them was, you know, these are intelligent guys I'm dealing with. They're carpenters, they're intelligent, who knew? You know, and I'd say, if there's plastics, glues, any of that sort of crap in it, you'll end up ingesting it. So it has to be clean. No cigarette ends, you know, blah, blah. Brilliant. And that was perfectly sensible way of doing things. Then they decided that people might not be doing that. So we, as Max said, had to get the stuff over by road from Germany through the UK. Now with Brexit, that's an impossibility, and I'm not even going there. But just late last year, Food Safety Authority and the Fisheries Protection Authority said you can use hardwood timber. And you're thinking, right? So that's great. So now we're okay with it. This is again demonstrating the brining process when we're doing the filleting and the smoking process. Somebody's just asked about bark on, bark off. Very interesting. That's a very, very good question. Once in the past, when I was working with my neighbours and my carpenter friends, we procured elm, which Jeremy, see, we're in such exalted company here, dear. Jeremy Irons was reconstructing a very old castle, and he procured elm trees. He wanted 12-inch square beams to hold the roof up on his castle. So I was fortunate enough to be given some of those trimmings, and I had nothing else to use. A bunch of small fish that needed smoking. Damn, no proper shavings. I'll have to use that elm, which frankly had gone a bit black because there was so much bark on it. Smoked the fish with it, vacuum packed it, stuck it in the back of the cauldron and thought, maybe in 6 or 8 weeks' time I might taste that. They were small salmon, so I was prepared to take the hit. So I had a chef working with me, and he said, what's this story with all those fish? So I said, would you mind tasting them for me, chef? So he tasted it and he went, and I thought, oh God. I said, what? He said, that tastes amazing. And it was because of the bark. An incredibly good question. I think the tradition for using oak for smoking from jay was the bark wood gives you loads of tannins. And now what you're procuring is the heartwood of the tree with no tannins in it. So bark, incredibly beautiful. When I tasted it tasted like it had been immersed in walnut oil. You know, there was just such a nutty flavour. It was stunning, but no bark again. Good question. Sorry, Max. Yep, far away. Max is also an artist. Do you see all this beautiful fish? That was Max. This is me doing a demonstration of the hot smoking, and you don't need big kit. This is a fish kettle, and it's amazing the number of people that have fish kettles at the back of the cupboard and they don't use them. They are the perfect container for doing a bit of hot smoking at home, because you have an insert and, you know, off it goes. It's brilliant. Yeah. Pack the shavings down, then put the insert in with the fish on it. This is very fine beach sawdust. That just helps us tamp down the timber in the drawers so that it's not inclined to flare up. So we dampen that down, and that holds back the flames and smoulders beautifully. Oh yeah. Last summer, 5th of July, we decided we'd celebrate wild salmon and eat it fresh. And yeah, this is cooking the steaks. Max had said to me, so how are we going to cook the salmon? And I said, I'm doing it the way I've always done it, which is cut it in thick steaks like that. Bring salty water, as salty as seawater, to the boil. Drop the steaks in, bring it back to the boil, switch it off, leave it 10 minutes, and that's absolutely perfect. So Max asked me what kind of sauce we would have with it, and I said, no, definitely, no, we'll let the fish speak for itself. Subsequently, Max planked them. Did you put up any photos of the planking?
I think so, but I think what's so awesome about these pictures of you, Sally, was that, like, or for me anyway, was that the decision was to just have a day of talking about wild salmon, for God's sake. It's like, I'm not Irish. I'm from Birmingham and my mum's Italian, but not Alabama, as Birmingham City in the UK once bought all of their postcards, which were wrong because they bought the postcards of Birmingham, Alabama. Anyway, different story. It's just that it was just to offer, instead of Sally's incredible smoked fish, which is utterly delicious and for me the best way to eat wild Atlantic salmon, uh, that it was just an opportunity to allow people who, you know, we talk about indigenous a lot when we talk about salmon, and we always think of First Nations and honoring and these very wholesome, very attractive ideas of tradition and just being generally good. But then you kind of, I sort of was just thinking about, the indigenous Irish people who would rely on enormous numbers of salmon coming all the time, and you're not going to wrap it in beeswax, and you're not going to, beautifully smoke it necessarily all the time. It would have been a staple, and it was amazing to get these really, and very cool that Sally was so happy to do it, but to take some of the precious stock, which is for cold smoking the salmon for the smokery, to take a couple of these fish and just allow people to experience them as would have been the case forever in Ireland. And actually, so that it was really difficult to be like, oh God, are we really just gonna, chop a piece of salmon and boil it in seawater and serve it with potatoes and nothing else? It's like, really? But then actually we did, and it went down so well because people came for Salmon Celebration Day because we just wanted to open a dialogue about wild Atlantic salmon. Because in my experience, it's not very much talked about here, or maybe it's something that's forgotten. But yeah, somebody stood up at the end and just said, he was really emotional because he was like, just like to say, I haven't thought of my granddad in years, and this just totally reconnected me to thoughts of my old family, and that just blew my mind because it was like a simple salmon steak boiled in seawater with potatoes and butter, and that's just it. Sometimes you don't need any more, and it was awesome. That was so much fun, and why it was really cool to just allow people to experience the salmon because they're so rare and hard to get these days.
Yeah. Oh, it used to be that people that worked were indentured. There we are. That's it. Poached, simple, and you cannot believe how delicious that is. It's moist because we haven't boiled the oil out. But people that were indentured here as apprentices, to whatever trade they were learning, they sign a contract. For the next 7 years, I'm going to work here, and I am not going to have to eat wild salmon more than twice a week. That was the nature of the beast. The rivers were black with them. Every single river in this country had a run of salmon, and everybody ate them, some unwillingly. But it's such a wonderful protein, and when you eat it, your body feels it. You feel the strength in it. We ate the livers out of that fish as well, just because, and I had them for lunch yesterday, Max, sorry. When we were filleting yesterday, we kept the livers back, and they're extraordinary as well. Make the most of it, trying to do nose to tail, which was why Max developed the botarga. We asked the authorities if they might analyze the oil that we create. When we're trimming the fish, we keep all the scrappy bits back and render them to get those slightly smoky salmon oil out of them, and that's a lovely product. Very intense, but very interesting. So we asked the authorities if they would maybe analyze it for, is it safe and how nutritious is it compared to the other stuff? And they wanted a kilo of botarga and a litre of the oil. And you're going, that would be an annual output. So no, not a chance. Yeah, but that was fun. Next. Yeah, they're so beautiful. Next. And sorry, what I didn't say there was you might have noticed there's a lot of blood in the fish. Normally with other fish, you would gut them, before you freeze them, obviously. But wild salmon, as I said, there's nothing in their stomachs. They stopped feeding thousands of kilometers away out in the ocean. So they come back with a vestigial intestinal tract, no active gastric juices whatsoever. So they're frozen whole. And that retains the color in the belly. If you gut them, the fat will hydrogenate naturally if it's in the freezer or in the fridge, and the bellies will go bright yellow and orange and look deeply unsatisfying. You wouldn't want to eat them. So they're whole. And this is inside the keep again. Yeah. Smocks. Thank you, Hermione. Sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Blackwater.
These are the commercial fishermen. You know, these are the enormous boats and the absolutely humongous enterprise that is, you know, commercial fishing on the Blackwater. That's it, one boat. And Eamon in the distance there, he holds the net and he walks the slob, which is the mud, along with the boat as they're kind of treading water. To this is for line tension. You know, yeah, that's just one of the few salmon that got in there. Yeah, that was the tagging process, just because they're so yeah, it's very what's the word, not guarded, well observed. Anyway, it's you know, it's trying to make sure that poaching doesn't happen. Yeah, so Sally this only handles legitimate fish, which are within quota, and that is the deal was on Wild Salmon Day, and then also we tried to during COVID, because the school was closed, we had to sort of diversify a little bit, and then actually the Wild Salmon Day was super popular, so then we decided to, if it was sunny, I would like plank roast the salmon, and if it was windy and rainy, Sally would do the traditional cutlets. So this was a sunny day where people got to try some salmon, you know, cooked with lots of tasty roasty flavors.
Yeah, it was extraordinary, wasn't it? Yeah, it's fab. Yeah, that was great fun. Oh, he's gold.
Yeah,
that's his Genoa T-shirt as well, isn't it? That was his purchase from Slimfish. Bless him.
Again, just in part of the courses, just talking about wood and wood grades, and Sally just describing what everything does, and then at a very low burn you get a delicious sweet smell. So that was just when we were describing the smoking regime at the school. That's a little that's an eye of an albacore tuna.
Oh, it still gives me nightmares. Oh,
these are just tasting boards. Yep, sorry, Charles.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's not just photographs that you take. I mean, your presentation and food styling is second to none. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's just kind of fun to note that I'm a massive fan of cutting the fillet straight down, because Sally already removes all of the bones. You can slice it straight through down to the skin and then remove the skin, and then I think the texture's beautiful that way. And also you weirdly get lots of little salmon shaped pieces of salmon. Yeah. And there's amazing way that Sally will serve pollock, smoked pollock. Normally people will poach it in milk and make cunning skink, delicious things like this, but actually if you slice it super thin with a drizzle of good olive oil, and Sal, I think you love using lime just for the it's really delicious. And then salmon on soda bread with butter, you can't beat it.
Yeah. And that's a hake head. They're got a great set of teeth, haven't they? I find them really easy fish to demonstrate filleting with, because they got one bone. Haddock's a bit tricky for teaching people to fillet, but and there's bountiful fish around Ireland, the hake, and it's grand. Oh, look at that stylish outfit. Oh God, that's my kitchen. Yeah, that's a simple lunch at the Smokery. Yeah, brilliant.
Maybe it's just worth mentioning super briefly, the previous picture, I think why that's cool, at least for me, thank you, is that it's really precious, and you can't buy a huge piece because it'll be quite expensive when you see it in the shop. But you know, chef's perks and everything. For me, that is the first thing that I ate when I came to Ireland: pieces of Sally's wild salmon on soda bread with loads of butter, salty butter, you know, so thick that you can actually feel biting through it with your teeth. And just, you know, you have it there and you have it with a cup of tea. And for me, that was just my experience of Ireland, and is just one of my favorite things to eat. And it's best served like that, I think. That's one of my top 5 things to eat of all time in Sally's kitchen there. And that's how it gets served as well at the tastings. It's particularly spiny salmon. That's all about the pinnacle, Sal. Go for it.
Oh gosh, right, I'm back to pellicle. Sorry, I'm doing 3 things at once, aren't I, Fab? Oh yeah, that's a really beautiful picture. That's the cured surface of the fish. You can see it's just little pool, not even pools, it's little beads of salmon oil coming out of the cells because the cells have been desiccated by the salt and the smoking process. And if you look at the edge of the photograph, that's not a particularly fat fish. So that wouldn't have required as much time in the salt because the belly wall's not that thick. But yeah, that's what we're seeking to attain. That's not wet anymore. There's no potential for bacterial activity. Next. Yeah, look at that. Now that's the better one. You see the belly wall on that one's thicker. It's you can see it. It's much thicker. So that would be a better eating fish. This is haddock, wonderful fish. It's Scots folks' favourite fish. So that's another one that I absolutely adore. Thinly sliced and slightly acidulated. If it's not a winter's night, when I would do potatoes, onions, milk, and smoked haddock or smoked pollock or smoked hake, and make a Cullen skink. It's the ultimate and comfort food. I've been very lucky to have access to so much wonderful fish. You know, been married to a fisherman's not that bad, really, especially when he's not at home. But yeah. Yeah, slicing. And it's lovely, the slice straight down. You're getting to taste, you know, every profile of the flavour. Somebody's asked about shipping it to America. That's gorgeous. Yeah, love the mussel structure. Each mussel bundle, and their bundles, is connected to a scale on the skin outside the fish. That blew my mind. David at Neil's Yard sliced a salmon for me, and he showed me how he did it. He took the lateral line down the center of that fillet and took a slice off the top, slice off the bottom, and went through the whole fish at an angle. And all the slices had this fantastic diamond pattern in them, just like the skin where the scales were. So then I thought, oh my holy moly, that probably means that each scale can be adjusted by the fish. That completely blew me away. Maybe I'm raving. I don't think so. Mussel bundles are there for a reason, aren't they? Yeah, beautiful. The reveal. Oh, back one. Who is that masked man?
That's me.
Excellent. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Max.
My pleasure. That was super fun. Yeah.
That was fun.
Thank you so much. I love getting the story and then allowing everyone to sort of create the image in their own minds, and then going through this beautiful imagery that we have of your reality. I don't want to keep you all for too much longer, but this has been so wonderful. We do have a couple questions, but Max is helping me out and tremendously, and Sally too, I think, by answering some of your questions right in there. I want to encourage you to follow Woodcock Smokery and Max Jones. I've put the links in. I'll throw them in one more time. I hope I'm not overstepping by saying that you should reach out to them and follow along with what they're doing. Sally, I would certainly join the chorus of when can we get this all the way out here, although it's a long way for food to go, which is not generally my MO, to be honest. But I can't wait to get myself to Ireland. Somebody asked about food tours, and if you go onto the Woodcock Smokery website, which I just put into the chat, there are links and information about workshops and tastings and visits to the smokery. So you can follow up there and learn more. And I am so looking forward to the day when I can get myself over there to try this remarkable fish, to meet you both and see your smokery. My visit to Ireland has been a lifetime overdue. So as my Irish father would agree.
Well, you should have come today.
I wish.
Yeah. Well, you wait till the bars are open because it's
Yeah,
not
I think
more
I
fun.
will. I like the music and the beer. Sounds like a good part of that experience.
Yeah, it's very weird not having the bars. I'm going to have a drop of fish the day that's in it. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Yeah, he was an interesting man, a bit of a renegade. It's quite funny. There was a big thing in the local paper. If you Google Cork Examiner or the Irish Examiner, it's the local paper. It's a national paper now. But there was a lovely article about St. Patrick and who the hell was he, because they don't have a birth date for him. Why do they have a death date for him? He was imprisoned for 6 years, but I can't remember where. But really, his birth date is very close to the spring equinox. And that pagan festival was and look, the leaves are bursting out and the flowers are coming. It's spring again. Winter's behind us. We can look forward to the summer months of plenty ahead of us. So I think I'd rather honor Sheila in a way.
Excellent. I'll join you. I will certainly raise a toast to you this evening, to both of you. And this, I want to ask one question before we let you go, because it's been asked a couple times, which is sort of, I think this is probably a long answer, but if we can sort of briefly go into the difference between hot and cold smoking and why you choose it to do the way you do.
Yeah, there's a good question. Well, I suppose the tradition would be for cold smoking salmon and haddock and the whitefish. Though Mr. Jones does a very good line in accidental hot smoked haddock. Which turned out absolutely beautiful. We'd been hot smoking in the kiln the day before, and we'd forgotten to cancel out the little dial that takes the temperature up to 50 centigrade. Anyway, so we took it up to 90 to pasteurize it, and it was lovely. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, we are slow food after all, so we're all about this traditional method, even if it takes longer.
Somebody asked me about the salt. Oh, golly. Yeah, I did mention that Ireland embraces all incoming with open arms and makes life very difficult, because the interpretation of rules and regulations is down to the one individual or two that pitch up at your door. And we've been becoming more and more aware as artisan producers in this country that they're sending out people who have no idea of artisan techniques, how we do what we do. And they've been trying to force us into kind of factory type standards. I'm supposed to have showers in the workshop, flush toilets in the workshop. And you saw how close it is to my front door. Thankfully, at the moment, I'm not incontinent, so I can make the house. But we've now built, because of the keep, we have a fantastic off-grid, what would you call it, a facility. So we don't have to come up to the house to use the facilities. But they do make life very, very difficult for small producers. So we've been battling for some time now to try and get into the colleges to train the trainers, not the students. The trainers are working from, the big book. It's all about theoretical factory production, whereas what we need them to know is my methods or artisan cheesemakers' methods. so that they can fully understand, so that when they come and inspect, they're not going, oh, you can't do that, without having enough information to make those decisions that make or break small businesses. It's been a bit of an issue. So the salt, I need to have all the certification, that the specification sheets, and a lot of the artisan salts can't supply that, or if they can, it's too expensive. I mean, we go through 25 kilo sacks of salt like it's going out of fashion, and it's used once and then given to the guy who takes the carcasses to salt the carcasses with. So, and it's then going back into the ocean. So yeah, it's tragic. But if you can access sea salt and use that, the mineral flavors that you get from that are far superior. But we can't do it. Sorry.
Interesting.
Mm.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so inspiring and interesting. There's been a lot of really wonderful commentary in the chat. So Max and Sally, I'll share that with both of you. Max, thanks so much for helping answering questions over here and for sharing your photographs. Thank you both for your time. Sally, thank you for sharing your story and your knowledge and sort of passing it on so we can carry on. I agree that these traditional techniques and methods and lifestyles, frankly, are so important. And we're really glad and grateful to be able to hear your story and to be connected to you with Slow Fish. So, and a quick reminder, the Slow Fish 2021 virtual gathering begins tomorrow. I'll throw another link in here. And so there's lots of folks in the Slow Fish community who have stories of their own space and place and practice that we'll hear from in 6 days of programming for Slow Fish. So join us if you like. And I just want to point out that there's this sort of a campaign for a Sally and Max World Tour. You're being called to Bristol Bay in Alaska, the Narragansett Bay in New England. So, I'll keep an eye out to see where we can all catch you someday. But thank you so much. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We'll raise a glass to you.
Your very good health. And this is the passing glass. Thank you. Thank you so much for the time and the questions. Maybe I'll take can you send the questions on to me?
Yes, I think so. I think Max has managed to work through so many of them, but I think that I can pull them from the back end and send them along.
Fab. Thank you so much. Bless you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I feel this has been just so invigorating, and I appreciate your time so much. We'll see you soon.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Safe
okay.
Ciao.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.